believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? What's up? What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Rendez, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have Teryn Gregson, the host of the Faithful Freedom Podcast, a great show, great host, amazing conversation. I can't wait for you guys to hear this one. I'm going to keep this intro super short. I know I always say that, but this one is definitely going to be short because I'm trying to get this podcast out prior to the third annual vaccine Safety Awareness Marathon. It's a third annual. It's the third time that I'm participating in it. My guest Teryn is also going to be participating in it. Her show and the marathon is brought to you by We the Patriots USA, which you guys might know because the founder, attorney Brian Festa, has been on the Ripple Effect Podcast and the Union of the Unwanted a bunch of times, so I'm sure you're familiar with his work. And please, if you listen to this or watching this prior to September 10th and 11th, tune into the Vaccine Awareness Safety Marathon and donate if you can. I'll put links in the show description to We the Patriots USA's website. There you'll find more information about the marathon and more information about my guest. And like I said, I'm going to keep this intro short. If you want to support the show, this is a Value for Value show. If you can and you want to support the show, go in the show description and check out our sponsors and all the other methods of supporting the show. If you can't financially support the show, don't worry about it. Rate, review, tell people about the show, and that goes a long way. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
I believe in the ripple effect.
I guess start as far back as you would like, go into as much detail or as little as you would like, and let people know who you are and how you got here.
All right. Well, my name's Teryn Gregson. I am formerly a sports and golf broadcaster, but now God has put me on a new path as a podcaster, and I am a podcast host for Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson, presented by We the Patriots USA. We drop new episodes each Wednesday, and we just started up season 2 on September 7th. So that's my current broadcast role, but my main role is wife and mother of two and under. So life's came at us pretty quickly here in the past couple of years. I've had 2 COVID babies. That's how long the pandemic lasted for all of us. But going way back to my origins, I am from the St. Louis area. That's where born and raised in Waterloo, Illinois. Grew up in that area. So did my husband. And it's a small town. And, it was really molded by the wonderful people around us, our family, my mom and dad, my brother, and my grandparents really had a huge, especially my grandfather had a huge influence on my faith and my background. And then from there, I went on to the University of Missouri Journalism School and got a broadcasting degree there and went off into the world of sports broadcasting and had been doing that for over a decade, and moved down to Florida to work for CBS Sports. And about a little under a year into that gig, got my gig at the PGA Tour as a golf broadcaster. I had always grown up playing golf, loved the game. My husband and we weren't married at the time whenever I took the job, but he was a professional golfer. Now he's a golf teacher. So golf has just always been a part of our lives and our relationship. And so that was a fun job. And you know, I never would have thought that it would have ended the way that it did. And, I regret nothing, but it was a very interesting experience and one of the more difficult experiences I've been through as of to date. But we can get into that a little bit. But I think too that my background in journalism and going to journalism school has really made me kind of cringe about the state of media and where media has gone. Working in the podcasting realm and maybe the commentary realm, that's one thing, but people that, you know, claim to be unbiased journalists that really aren't, and people that are not diving into the, really trying to actually look into the facts, just making assumptions and things like that. I mean, it's been hard to kind of watch how that has evolved over the past couple years, because it wasn't that long ago that I was in journalism school and we were taught to be unbiased. We were taught to, dig deeper and to find the true facts. But I think that too, my background and when I came up in journalism school kind of gives me a little insight to how this happened, and that, this was about a little under 15 years ago, and it was right whenever social media first started. I mean, I would think I was a junior in college, and my professor made me get a Twitter account, and I'm like, why do I need a Twitter account? Like people are just tweeting about what they had for lunch that day. Like, why do I need a Twitter account? I'm a journalist, right? So that happened at the same time. Fast forward a year later, I'm graduating from college, and this was just after the market had crashed, and it was impossible to get a job in journalism at that point, especially in sports journalism, because sports departments were the first thing to go at newspapers and TV stations when they had to really cut back on their budget. So all of this is happening at the same time as social media, where news departments were just cut in half or even worse than that because they didn't have the budget to hire reporters and things like that. And we're entering into an age of instantaneous headline news. So at the same time that investigative journalists were, losing their jobs, this is when we were also deciding that, we had to get news out there as quickly as possible and as much as possible in order to stay relevant in the business. So I think that was kind of just a perfect storm of how we fast forward, get to where we are today, because these businesses have still sort of left the investigative reporting to the wayside. No longer do they let these reporters generally work on, stories for months at a time and try to really dig into the facts. They want, multiple stories, multiple headlines a day from these reporters. So, I think we're slowly starting to turn the corner there with Project Veritas and different places like that are allowing these reporters to work on their stories for long periods of time and to really do investigative work. But that's kind of my hypothesis in a nutshell there, of how the market crashing and social media emerging at the same time really impacted the journalism industry.
Yeah, and I've had people on like Christy Lee and Ben Swan who came from like somewhat traditional journalism backgrounds, and then realize like, hey, like I this isn't about bringing information or news to the public. This is about propaganda. This is about pushing a narrative. And I think a lot of, I mean, if nothing good if we can find one thing that came out of the COVID whole pandemic that is positive, it's the fact that a lot of people are waking up to just how bad the media really is. And not just that, like how bad science really is, how unscientific science really is, how doctors and, quote unquote experts, how they have opinions and perspectives and narratives that they push. And that's, that's something that we kind of all knew. These are all things that we kind of all knew, but I think it just got to such a extreme that now it's like you can't just ignore it or accept it. It became so over the top. And same thing with sports. Like I'm a big sports fan. My voice probably sounds bad right now because I coach my son's soccer team, and we had our first practice of the season, and there's like 40 kids, so I spent a lot of time screaming.
Herding cats.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love sports, but during the COVID lockdown, uh, it was nice to have some of the sports come back, but so much of it was a turnoff because it became so political, and you could not watch basketball or anything without like force feeding you, COVID vaccine propaganda, or just all the agendas, all
Mhm.
the riots that they were kneeling for, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is our getaway for many people. This is our opportunity to forget about the real world, for an hour or two, and get away from this stuff. And I couldn't get away from it. And I think a lot of people got turned off from it. What was your experience as a sports fan? Did you have that same type of experience where you kind of were pushed away from sports because of all that extra stuff that came with it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it did start to really happen prior to COVID, that all of these agendas were being pushed into sports. We really saw it with Colin Kaepernick and, the kneeling during the national anthem. That was several years before COVID even happened. And Black Lives Matter being painted all over, everywhere. Those agendas were already starting to seep into sports, and fans were already really getting sick of it. And I think, like you said, it really reached a headway during COVID. And people were like, I just want to watch sports and escape, not think about all of this. And not only that, sports are a way to bring us all together, or to have fun, friendly rivalries, right? That you can, be mad at somebody for an hour and a half during a football game because you're on the opposite, you're rooting for the opposite team, but yet you can still come together over a beer and some wings, right? So I think that people they still crave that, and they still miss that. And they haven't, I feel like they haven't come back down from all of this. I feel like they keep continuing to go down this wrong path. But they're doing it because they haven't been hit too hard in the pocketbook yet, right? The market's going to dictate a lot of this. So if fans are still watching it, if they're still buying tickets and things like that, these teams are still going to do it. Now, granted, I think they also, these teams and these leagues are also pressured in other ways, and not just with fan money. I think that they're also pressured by the administration. They're pressured by ESG scores. They're pressured by foreign interests, China, things like that, other places that they're getting their money. So I think that comes in and factors in a lot. But I was working in golf whenever the lockdowns happen and things like that. And it was really interesting because golf was actually the first major sport back. UFC, I think, they had a fight like a couple days before the PGA Tour came back on air. And so it was really interesting to be a part of that first wave of sports coming back. And it was the fans, people were craving it. We had a lot of people watching golf because they just wanted to watch anything. And the PGA Tour was on for a couple months before the other sports, came back and everything. So it was fun in a way to be a part of sort of a historical moment, and sort of a way to trailblaze back from, the unnecessary lockdowns and things like that. So that was neat. But in my case, it quickly turned around once the vaccine was released. And then the PGA Tour really did jump on the bandwagon with the rest of the leagues, and how they were handling that, and the way that they were pushing agendas and messages.
Now, being around athletes and stuff like that, and around those people who are typically not outspoken, they kind of keep their opinions reserved. Did you feel like there's a lot of people who could kind of see what was going on, but felt the need to kind of just keep their opinions to themselves because it could affect their career in a negative light or whatever? I know we mentioned in the beginning when we're chatting about Kane from WWE, Mayor Glenn Jacobs. That's one thing I give him a lot of credit for, is because he has this huge fan base that he knows he's gonna, just cut in half because he's so outspoken about his views, and yet he's willing to do it anyways. And so I give like tons of credit for people like him who stand up for what they believe in, say what's on their mind, um, feel like it's more important to say these things and stand up for these values, even if it means it's not a great career move. Do you feel like some people weren't doing that they were kind of holding back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of athletes were holding back, and I got messages from a lot of players after I was fired, in support and saying they wish that they could speak out about the truth and whatnot. But I don't necessarily think it is an athlete's place to really talk about that kind of stuff, right? I mean, they're not public, or I shouldn't say they're not political figures. They're, like you said, they're there to entertain us. They're there to play ball, to play their sports. And it wasn't really until guys like Colin Kaepernick and LeBron James and athletes like that really were giving their political opinions like that. And I think that now in the space that we're in, we see these athletes or celebrities or public figures or whatnot voicing their opinions, because it did come to a point where people were hurting because the truth wasn't being told, and people were losing their jobs, people were losing their livelihoods. And so these guys couldn't stand around, and it was affecting them too, right? They were being forced to do something that put something in their bodies that they didn't want to do. I mean, athletes are very conscious of what they put in their body. They didn't want to put something that they knew nothing about into their bodies. And Kyrie Irving was a big and Novak Djokovic. Those are two current athletes that were huge and standing their ground. And it came to a point where it was very much a civil rights issue that was affecting them. It was affecting other people. And, unfortunately, an issue of whether or not to get a jab became a political issue, which, in the past, that's never really been a political issue. So, I think it's kind of twofold in that it's not really an athlete's job to say anything about something like that. And let's be honest, why would sports fans or anybody really care too much about what their favorite athlete thinks about certain political issues? That's not really what you look to your athletes for, right? I think it's been quite interesting to see how sports has taken a turn in that direction. Never in the past would any of these guys ever really openly talked about things like that, like I said, until the emergence of those like Colin Kaepernick and LeBron James. And those guys obviously think that they really can make a difference in the things that they care about by what they say. But they obviously, I think that's also been redirected into they're making money off of what they're saying and the positions that they're taking too.
Well, it's weird because I have kind of a different opinion on it. Because the thing is, I don't have a problem with athletes or actors, actresses, celebrities, whoever may be having a opinion on things, as long as it's a well thought out opinion. My problem with LeBron James is that he's a puppet to China.
Yeah.
And and basically he just says what they tell him to say. He doesn't have a well thought out opinion, yet he tries to come off like he has this profound opinions and thoughts and ideas, and that he's standing up for something. It's like, you don't stand up for anything, and you're just pretending that you have morals and values and all these things. And that's the part that bothers me, because if you look at like Mike Adams in the NBA, Isaac Johnson, who's outspoken, I believe, right, plays for Orlando.
Yes.
Who was outspoken.
Yeah, they're very well thought out. And I agree. That's what I mean. I think that, someone like LeBron James, like maybe it started out with well intentions, but it has clearly been now, like you said, he's a mouthpiece for certain people. And I think he's making money off of the things that he's saying in one way or another. Obviously, we know that the NBA benefits greatly from the money that it gets from China. So, yeah, I think people kind of got fed up with that, right? No one wants to, again, it's an escape. That's what I mean. Like, that's why we don't really necessarily, it's fine for them to have opinions, of course. And, you know, I can even like an athlete that has a different opinion than me if I, enjoy the way that they play and present themselves, on the athletic field. But yeah, it's gone too far and it's turning fans off.
Well, I think if even if you disagree with somebody, because I know it's
Mhm.
like one of those things where we, even myself, it's like, oh, don't push your values on kids or whatever. And I remember I had Professor Michael Millerman on the show, who's super fascinating guy. He's one of the people who translated, I think the first person to translate Alexander Dugin's books into English. And but very fascinating. But I remember him highlighting this point about, he's like, yeah, he's like, a lot of us complain about like pushing um teachers pushing their beliefs and worldviews onto our children. But and then he made the point, he's like, but what if it's a worldview and opinion that you agree with, like all of a sudden you're okay with it? And so that's like something I have to catch myself and be like, okay, I don't want this person being outspoken, but if I agree with them, then I don't have a problem with it. So it's like, okay, is it the outspoken thing, or is it the fact that they're just not, it's not a well thought out opinion? Because even if I disagree with somebody, if I felt like, okay, they've thought this out, they're well read, they're this is truly how they feel, you could respect that. But when you
Mhm.
stand for nothing and and you're pretending you stand for something, that's the part that I think really makes people upset, because it's like you don't know anything about these issues, and you're only going with whatever the mainstream narrative is because it's good for your career, just like all these corporations that it's like, they'll be for this or for that, or, they're for whatever, transgender rights or whatever. And it's like, do, do they really care about transgender people, or are they doing it because it's good for business? And
Mhm.
like, I think that the fake part of it is what really bothers people. How much during the COVID um, time at the last couple of years, like how much of your worldview and opinions changed because of it? Like, were you um, a, exposed to the like issue, like we were talking about before, like these issues became much more obvious, or were these things that you already knew were happening and were issues prior to COVID?
I think I think a little bit of both. In that, yes, I had always kind of questioned, the medical system in general, and anybody that's making a lot of money off of you and doesn't really have your full interest at heart. I had always kind of been a little bit skeptical of it all, but for the most part, was trusting and had a positive outlook on everything. We were already starting to see the different agendas that were being pushed onto our children prior to all of this. But I think it's more than anything made me just double down into my faith and into the truth and what I believe. And I think it's made me um more firm and more steadfast in all of my beliefs. Actually, I think it's really made, and I think a lot of people feel that way, that they've really started to dig their feet in the sand, right, and in the arenas that they that mean a lot to them and what they think. So I think if anything, it's just made me more steadfast in my beliefs. Yeah, and but again, it's going to deeper, a little bit deeper than I thought. But I've I don't want to say that I've always been, mistrusting of people. I don't want to say that, but those big systems that have a lot of money to be had, whether that's big pharma or politics or whatnot, I've always kind of thought that there was underlying ulterior motives and things like that. And with the I was already starting to ask a lot of questions with the childhood vaccine schedule and things like that, because I'm a new mom. And so, that was happening to me in real time as all of this was going on. They're showing me the schedule where my, tiny little bitty baby, they're wanting to give, several shots. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem right to me. I don't want to do this. Let's pump the brakes, let's really dig into the to the facts and the stats and slow this down. And, that's when the vaccine then came out shortly after that, and when I really was like, okay, that was right to be questioning everything, so that opened my eyes a little bit more, I should say. But I also want to circle that back to kind of what you were talking about as well, and that so many people like myself included, and these athletes, yes, we have our own opinions behind the scenes, but my job in particular is to remain unbiased and to try and go into things with an open mind and things like that. And we were all able to function like that and to all get along. I felt like once these corporations, these leagues and things like that were pushing their agendas on us and forcing us to comply, to go along with it or get out, that's when people and athletes were forced to give their opinions that they otherwise wouldn't have done, myself included. I was a sports broadcaster. I didn't need to take a political stance on anything like this, right? And I think a lot of athletes feel the same way. You mentioned Isaacs. It all started for him because he didn't want to kneel during the national anthem through all of the Black Lives Matter things like that. So, and he wasn't even calling attention to it. He just simply stood out of respect for this country during the national anthem. And, then he came under fire for that. But it's not like he walked out there and was like, hey guys, I'm not kneeling, I'm standing up, pay attention to me, ask me questions. No, he was just going along with what he felt was right and what he believed. And then that's when, he started to really get asked questions and came under fire. Same with Djokovic. He wasn't calling attention to the fact that he didn't want to get vaccinated until he got thrown in, quote unquote jail in Australia. And then they weren't letting him play around the world. Myself, I wasn't going to say anything publicly until they fired me, so it's just, I think a lot of journalists and a lot of athletes and entertainers have been forced to say their opinions.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, like you said, there's nothing wrong with also keeping your opinions to yourself and just saying, "Hey, this isn't a part of my job, my gig. There's no reason for me to just, share it randomly for no reason." But I'm glad that people did because, unfortunately,
Mhm.
People do look up to athletes, even and people look up to celebrities, and which is also why big pharma use celebrities and athletes to
Sure.
get their message across. Because when it's an emergency authorization vaccine, then they can't promote it, and they didn't need to because everybody else was doing it for them, which was mind boggling. But
And they kind of broke the silence too a little bit, right? Guys like Aaron Rodgers and Kyrie Irving, I know I already mentioned him, but those two really helped give other people courage to stand up and tell the truth, because it got to the point where so many lies were being told to everyone. And there were so many people that were like, what are you guys talking about? But they weren't, everyday people weren't allowed to say it. They were afraid they were going to lose their jobs. That's when the line is being crossed and when it is important to say and tell the truth.
yeah, without a doubt. And it was, I give all those athletes a lot of credit, the ones that did come out. I mean, Kyrie Irving, he doesn't stray away from controversy anyways. I sometimes I don't know if it's accidental or if it's on purpose, but I'm being from Massachusetts, I have a love-hate relationship with Kyrie Irving, but it's I love him as a basketball player. I think he's very talented, but I think he lacks some leadership skills. But in
Mhm.
regards to when that happened, I remember telling my friends, I'm like, I didn't think I'd ever wear my Kyrie Irving jersey again, but I'm like proud to wear it now because he actually picked his values and what he believes in ahead of basketball. Because I mean,
Mhm.
he knew that it did negatively affect his career. It prevented him from playing games. It prevented him from helping his teammates, and yet he stood his ground. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have done that. A lot of people were kind of DL about the vaccine thing. I know when Boston played in Canada and Toronto, I believe like Tatum and Brown didn't go up there. And there's all these rumors about maybe they weren't vaccinated. And I'm a big soccer fan too, and in soccer, same thing. Like a lot of guys weren't outspoken, but then when they were traveling to countries where they had strict vaccine laws, then all of a sudden they didn't travel with them. And I'm like, dude, stop, like, speak out, like, don't, because, and it's not that, I get it. I mean, I see both sides of the argument. Like, I see the side of like, okay, this isn't my place to speak out. I just want to do my, play the game I love. I don't want to go in the political spotlight. I don't want to be a part of this. And that was that was scary too, because they made the topic such a heated argument anytime somebody brought it up, and people were so passionate about whatever side or opinion you may have, that people couldn't even have a civil discussion about it.
Yeah. And, someone who's been in media, like I said, and how it's no long, it's very biased now. And, I don't blame these athletes for not wanting to talk about it, because the reporters that ask them questions and the reporters that they answer to are very one-sided on the issue and are not open-minded in hearing all parts of the issue. So, these guys knew that if they were going to talk to any sports reporter, they were going to be talking to a sports reporter that had a specific opinion, and they were not going to be nice about it. These sports reporters were not nice to these athletes that were, standing true to what they believed in and their beliefs. And it is really unfortunate. And I think that a lot of sports departments and sports writers are missing the boat on who a big majority of their audience is as well. And, a lot of, just like Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too. A lot of conservatives are sports fans. And I think these sports reporters they forget that, or they don't care, or whatever. I think that it's been a shame to see too how the bias has gone into sports reporters as well.
Now, after all this happened, what led you down the path of wanting to start a podcast and now being outspoken weekly?
Yeah, I know, right? I did quite the 180. Because like I said, it came to a point where, well, first of all, the podcast started, let me rewind a little bit here. The podcast started because We the Patriots USA, who is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, they work to help people regain or defend their rights in the court system and outside of the court system. And, I was at the time trying to keep my job and trying to, help others. I wasn't the only one at the PGA Tour, or even in the world of sports, that was trying to keep their job and hold true to their beliefs. And so I was asking for them for help. They stepped in and said that they were going to help me. They still are helping me try to get a little justice in this and help other people in the future, hopefully not succumb to further mandates or future mandates or things like that. But so they stepped in and said they were going to help me. They have been helping me. And, after I got fired, they're like, let's start a podcast. Let's really, and I said, okay, because there were so many other people going through it. I wanted to be able to give those people a platform and to allow them to tell their story. So we had, military members that were going through this, that we had employees at Bristol Myers Squibb that were, whistleblowing and coming out and telling things. So we had a lot of real people that were going through these issues. And, it's been fun to evolve with We the Patriots. And they've started to take on other cases like transgender ideology in public schools being forced on kids who were asking for religious exemptions and being denied. Critical race theory, they've been taking on cases with that. So they've really started to branch out, and so the podcast has as well. And for us on season 2, I think it's important now that we talk about where do we go from here. How do we educate ourselves in how deep all of this rot and deception has gone, and how we take a positive spin on that and forge a new path forward, and keep true to our beliefs and carve out a way for all of us that do have, that are not wanting to succumb to the woke agenda that seems to be really forced on a lot of people. I don't think that the average American wants to go down that progressive pathway. I think that most Americans do want to remain in the middle. And, I think it was God kind of thrust me into it, right? It wasn't anything that I had thought I would be doing, but I'm honored that he's allowing me to help tell people stories and help get the truth out there, because it is important now. We are in a different era and a different phase, and I hope that we can come together and not be so divided. But I think that it's just going to take some time. I think that people are in various phases of their journey to their eyes being open to a lot of this. And, some people's eyes won't ever be open to it, but other people, they still need the education. Some people are in mourning, really, right? They're in mourning on all of this. And then some people are on the other side. And I think that I'm in that camp of, okay, we see what happened. We know what's going on. Let's change it. We still have a positive outlook on what can happen and how we can move forward, and hopefully still conserve the founding principles of this country.
And is that one of your biggest motivations? Is that the founding principles of the country? You think they're something that we should focus on fighting for and is being lost? Like, what are some of the issues that keep you up at night, or the ones that motivate you to keep recording and keep putting out these conversations?
My two little kids are the ones that keep me motivated to continue pushing forward and making sure that we at least have the right to, educate our children in the way that we see best, to allow that they can still be functioning members of society, even if they don't, you know, necessarily follow the same ideologies as the bureaucrats or the powers that be. My two little kids are my motivating factor in all of this. Obviously, then that trickles out to helping others and fighting for other people. So, my hope is, yes, that we still have those founding principles on this country, and that, my family as a Christian family can continue to move forward and to live out our lives as Christians in this country, because we are coming under fire. And, obviously Christians around the world have succumbed to persecution for thousands of years, and many right now, risk their lives to practice Christianity in other parts of the world. And so I know that sounds really extreme, but when you can get fired for your religious exemption being denied, or your kid can't necessarily go to school because their religious exemption isn't granted, if that's the direction that all of this goes, I mean, that's a really scary place to operate and a really scary place to be. So my faith is another huge driving factor behind it all.
Well, I think they want us to be mindless and
Yeah.
faithless and not spiritual, and to believe the experts and not to question things, and not to believe in things or explore things that can't be explained. And these are all baby steps in a direction that I think we're all going into. Even like questioning what a human is,
Or a
question
man or a woman.
yeah, any of those
Mhm.
things. I think
Mhm.
they're baby steps to eventually. I mean, if we think that one of the ingredients to the end game is going to be this transhumanism, this
Mhm.
idea of combining man and machine, uh, to be able to do that, to be able to accept that, we have to blur the line of what a man is, and or at least blur the definition, or however you want to word it. Just rethink what is a human, what is a man, what is a woman, what are, and these are all baby steps into things. And I think the same way, staying at home for 2 weeks, it was hard for people to see that that was a baby step in a direction of, vaccinating the world, or pushing mRNA technology onto the world, or eugenics, depopulation type of agenda. Like, it just looks like a baby step. And when you just look at that little baby step, it doesn't seem important, it doesn't seem significant. But when you zoom out and you see, okay, where this could lead us, and when you start analyzing things that they publicly have said. I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, the Great Reset. I mean, that wasn't a term that conspiracy theorists came up with. This fourth industrial revolution, all these terms are not terms that we came up with. These are terms that they've openly talked about. These are agendas that they've openly discussed. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that all these things that are being sold to the public as things that are supposed to be for the benefit of us and the human and the human species isn't, and it's to their benefit. And little by little, we're, unfortunately, as the agenda unravels and gets exposed, hopefully we can keep fighting back before it's too late. And that's kind of what I'm concerned with, is just, can we get enough people to wake up? Because like you said, there's going to be a group of people that are always going to be brainwashed, that are just going to go with the mainstream narrative. Whatever they're told to do, that's what they're going to do. They're going to follow those arrows at the grocery store, even if nobody's around. They're not going to run a stop sign or roll a stop sign, even if it's like 2 a.m. and there's nobody for miles. It's like they've been brainwashed into just kind of going with the herd and not thinking for themselves, which goes into many other reasons, like public schooling, which I think was another issue that really got amplified or maybe magnified, because I think a lot of people knew there was issues with public schools and agendas being pushed, and maybe personal philosophies being pushed on the children, but nobody knew the extent of it, or we were just too busy to know that to pay attention to it. And now finally people are and that's the other thing, right? Like, talking about like the few positive things that came out of the lockdowns, it was the fact that and I'm an East Coaster. I was born in Portugal, but I was raised in Massachusetts, and people live crazy fast-paced lives. I mean, it just like, I just came from soccer practice. It's like, you go to work, you pick up the kids, you do this, you pick up the groceries, you go to soccer practice, you go home, you record your podcast. It's like nonstop, go. Most people live at that speed, and they never pump the brakes and really think about what's going on around them, or think about even just the bigger questions. This goes into like the whole spiritual thing too. And I know I'm going on like 7 different rants and tangents, but they're all connected. The spiritual things connected too. It's like, taking the time to think about the bigger picture of like, what's my purpose? What's really fulfilling? What really truly brings me happiness? Sometimes just having a religion or something, some spiritual book or spiritual philosophy or perspective on the world to force you to ask those questions can snap you out of the everyday grind matrix that many of us are living in.
I think they want to keep us busy, right? And they liked that we were too busy to think about it, and B, we were trusting the system and shipping our kids off to what we've now discovered are pretty much government indoctrination camps, right? And they're there for 9+ hours a day, being taught things that we thought were maybe not 100% what we wanted our kids to learn, but for the most part, they were okay. Well, we've learned that it's actually, way worse than that. And, I'm very blessed and my kids aren't in public school yet. They're 2 and under. I was a public school kid. I thought public school was great and fine. I was all right. Everything turned out fine for me, I think. So, you're right. That really woke me up, and I'm able to take ownership of my children's education and really think about it. Before I thought about it a little bit, but not to the extent that I am now. I'm definitely 100% rethinking it. And I think a lot of people are too. And not only are they wanting to keep us distracted and keep us busy, because then we don't think about things. We don't think about, too in depth where our kids are going and how the time is being spent with them. But I think too, like you said, whether you're a Christian or whatever sort of spirituality that you may have, it all comes down to a higher being and a creator, and the beauty in all of that, and the beauty in being created individually and intricately and purposefully, and the humanity that comes with that, and the the people, the, very select people that are maybe wanting to orchestrate the world going in a different direction, they have a lot to benefit from, really taking the humanity out of things, and just thinking of people as numbers and not as actual, emotional, worthwhile humans. Everyone has worth, and everyone should be loved and treated in a certain way. And I think that you see that exposed in a lot of these agendas, that they don't care about people and their humanity. And I hope that we can continue to fight for that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about becoming a parent. That's I'm sometimes stunned by the argument that teachers should even be having these discussions with our children in the first place. I'm like, as a parent, I want to have as much influence in who they are and who they become as possible, because nobody's going to love that child and care as much about that child's progression as I am, and as the parent. And so the idea that you want the state, or you want the public school teacher, or whoever, or whatever it may be, to have those deep, important, mind molding, worldview molding conversations with your child, it's just, it blows my mind. It's like, why wouldn't you want to take the initiative and be a part of that? And that goes into like just being too busy. And maybe we have to rethink the whole system. That's why when people used to use the term, the new normal, sometimes I'd be like, well, the old normal wasn't great, but boy, is it better than the new normal.
It's creepy, right? To call it that, the new normal. That's
It was
creepy.
creepy, yeah. And they would openly just talk about it, like, "Oh, we got to get used to the new normal." I know Baker in Massachusetts would talk about the governor, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get used to the new." I'm like, just weird. It's weird that you're so early in this whole thing already saying that we have to like rethink our whole lives. And to me, like, the old normal had flaws, and some of them being we're too busy, we didn't pay as much attention as maybe we should to these bigger questions, and maybe the more important job of parenting. And because it's like,
I mean, parents were just trying to do the best that they could in the fast-paced world. I mean, they were doing what they could, but
don't you
silver lining.
But don't you think some parents get so caught up with like work and all? It's like, because I was raised kind of like thinking this idea of a parent's job is to put food on the table and give me shelter in a house. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's the parent's job. I get that. That's absolutely true. But and then what's kind of left out is like almost the more important job is the discussion, the being there, the love, the support, the conversations, the helping me understand the world around me. And it's like, well, if you're not doing it, then who's doing it? Then YouTube's doing it, then Google's doing it, then the algorithms of Twitter or TikTok or whatever's doing it. And so and that's the thing, like we're like, I remember growing up, my dad, I remember him, and it wasn't that he was a bad person or a bad father, but he wasn't hands-on. Like, he grew up in a time back in the old country in Portugal where the father's job was to be the tough one, when you needed to be. But besides that, like, the mother did all the nurturing and caring and all that stuff. And now I'm like, dude, my dad probably missed out on all those amazing moments that I get to cherish and enjoy because I'm so hands-on and I'm so involved. And I went from being like resenting that to almost feeling remorse and bad because he didn't know any better, and he missed those moments. And so, but this goes again, like the family thing. We talk about some of the agendas, like just completely looking at the family like it's not a big thing and it's not important, and we can dismiss it, and we can kind of rethink what a family is, or even if it's necessary. And it's like, no, these things are important. And a family doesn't have to be, male, female, whatever. Like, there's plenty of gay couples that are great parents. There's plenty of whatever. But like, I just think having some type of family and understanding the importance of it, and the supporting one another, and understanding that that family's going to be there for you, thick and thin. Being together and having that love and support is important to me. That's awesome. And what, if it is a gay couple, straight couple, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter, as long as you're loving and supporting. But I think they don't want, it doesn't matter if it's gay, straight, whatever. They don't want any family values. They want you to be like, go to work, we'll raise your kids, send them off to school, send them off to college, make sure they're in debt when they get out of college. So, and then they're a slave to the job that whatever they're working. And then they're stuck in this repetitive motion of, buying material things that kind of deal with the unfulfilling career that they pursued.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, coming into motherhood during arguably, the height of my career, um, I was very fortunate enough my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we made sacrifices for her to be able to stay home with us. And to do that, we didn't have all the fancy stuff that maybe other kids did, but I wouldn't have traded that for the world. And my dad still provided us with a wonderful upbringing in all of it. And both of my parents were very involved in my upbringing. So, fast forward 30 years later, and here I am in my career, and I have my first child, and it's like, okay, when are you going to come back to work? When are you going to start traveling again? And when are you going to, get your next big gig? And, and it was just, keep pushing on me, like continue on the high roller coaster ride going upward in your career, keep pushing forward. And I'm like, hey, actually the most important thing that I'm doing right now is this little baby that we just brought into the world. And then, we added a second one into that. So, it really did kind of expose to me what the priorities of the world were. And, for me, it was going back to, my faith and my Christian roots and what I believe is, a good foundation for a family and the role of a mother. And so, I really wanted to be there for my kids and to do the right thing. And it's just it was really interesting to see how the world had a very different idea of what I should be as a mom than what I thought. They really saw kids in my, high paced world. They really saw kids as just an accessory, and they're great, and they're a blessing, but also your careers should be what you are focused on. And that didn't gel right with me, and I think it was, like you said, for me, that really was an eye-opening thing that God was showing me during all of this. And I think he has shown a lot of parents that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who like the idea of being a parent and having kids, and then the second they have them, they send them off to the grandparents, and I know people in my personal life that they spend very little time with their kids. They're constantly at the grandparents' house, or they're at soccer practice or daycare or something. And I'm like, when are you ever around your kids? Like, if you didn't want this job, just don't have kids. Like it is preventable to some extent, So to me, that's always a little bothersome, because I went through the experience like you did of becoming a parent, of not exactly like you did, but I was, in the process nearby. And I don't even know why I had to get
You do apparently have to clarify that these days. Whatever.
but the thing is, like, it's such a life-changing moment and situation that I don't understand people who go through that same situation and don't have the same emotional experience. I'm like, how does this not completely change your outlook on life? How does this not make you question all the vaccines you're putting your kids, or question like what are the people at the public schools teaching my kids, and what are they force feeding them, and all these things? Like, how are you not concerned about these things? And how are you completely okay with like immediately going back to work, and which means, like I said before, somebody else is putting those pieces together for the child? Because as every question that's answered, every piece of media that they're watching, everything is contributing to the way they look at the world. And if you're not involved in that, then aren't you a little bit responsible when they don't turn out the way that maybe they could have? And And so, yeah, it's concerning. And that's why I think even before COVID, like a lot of the people who were very outspoken and very um, involved in the medical freedom movement, or even in the like anti-GMO movement, there were moms. It was a lot of
Hmm.
moms because it's like, I don't care what I put in my body, but now like you're messing with my kids, like now I'm mad. Like, and I think that was a beautiful thing, and that's why a lot of people on the left and right, I'm like, are we on the same team when it comes down to this?
Hmm.
I'm like, why is this? Why did you let the media make it a political issue? This isn't a political issue. Like I thought people on the left were super skeptical of corporations, and now all of a sudden you believe them, and all of a sudden they're the good guys, and like they're here to. It's like, aren't you the ones who were protesting Monsanto? Weren't you guys the ones who were? It's like it was confusing, but it also shows how powerful the media still is. Like a lot of times, podcasters and people in alternative media, we talk about how like nobody watches the news, nobody. It's like you're right, like their ratings suck, and but boy, like people still kind of respect and consider the opinions of so-called experts. It's like if I'm saying something because I'm just a podcaster, it might go in one ear out the other. But if they see it on CNN, it's like they still consider it much more because it's on CNN, which is obviously a sad thing.
It is, and we're definitely seeing the landscape changing all of that in all of that arena, and people are seeking out alternative news sources. We're definitely seeing that. But I agree with you with everything you said. That was something that I kept saying throughout all of this. And yes, that particular side of the aisle was very much skeptical of those things and was always, you know, putting down corporations. Meanwhile, those politicians that were saying that, of course, are getting money in their back pockets from those organizations. But I kept saying the whole time, no matter what side of the political aisle you are on, we have always been taught and said to be skeptical of politicians. And all of a sudden, everyone 100% was believing everything that came out of politicians' mouths. Like, how did they flip the switch in their brain on that? I was like, wait a second, this is a common thing thread for everyone, right? That no one believes what comes out of their mouth, and all of a sudden they did. But I do want to add too that I heard somewhere, I believe it was Alicia Childers that said this, that the first person that broaches a subject with your child is on there, your child's automatically going to associate them as the expert in that. So if your child's teacher or school is, the first person that talks to them about sex ed, for example, they're going to automatically associate them as the expert on that. So wouldn't you rather have your kid come to you to talk to you about those big issues than somebody else or a YouTube person or what have you? So that's always really stuck with me.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and that makes perfect sense because if you're a child from their perspective and somebody's coming to you with that information initially, like, oh, if they're telling me this, they must be the all-knowing expert in this field, and we have to remember that even as I talked about before about me coaching these little kids, like my son's 7 and I'm coaching all the kids in his age group, and they look at me like I'm a like all-knowing expert. They call me coach. Their parents tell them to be respectful to me. And even though it's good and I like, the fact that they respect me to some extent, you're always a little concerned about like, listen, to my son. It's like, listen, even if it's a authority or a expert, like don't do everything they say and be skeptical of them, and don't and it doesn't mean that like you trust them in all regards, so it's a little concerning because I can see how the way these kids look at me, I could see how I could plant seeds of whatever ideologies I wanted into their heads because they're already looking at me like a authority, and I'm just like, wow, people could really take advantage of this little power that you have over their little brains, and the just how naive they are with their trust, and take advantage of that if you're a awful person. But yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that is an interesting new challenge, I think, for parents in this generation moving forward, because, before us, we were, generations that came before us were taught to respect authority, and we still should respect authority, obviously, but, people didn't have to really question too much people's motives, throughout the last couple decades in this country. And now all of a sudden we do have to really, kind of navigate that differently as parents than in past.
Yeah, well, as somebody who's done shows on child trafficking and all that stuff, I think some of it's kind of influenced the way I look at the world, and to a point where I'm like, listen, I don't trust anybody with my kids. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, listen, I like, all those people, like the people we trust the most, I don't trust them either.
Yes.
Not because I think they're gonna do anything, but not every story, but many of the stories are always like, oh my God, he was such a close friend of the family. Oh my God,
Mhm.
my kids loved him. And so it's like, just be skeptical and be aware that like predators are out there, and they also are very clever, and they know how to, look at Penn State. I mean, all the
Mhm.
Jimmy Seville, like all these people who are part of helping little kids, they were also harming and traumatizing little kids. So it's like, just stay aware, of these things. And like you said, maybe this stuff was always going on. And with Jimmy Seville, obviously, that's an example of somebody who's been doing this for a long time.
Mhm.
But it does seem like you're more concerned more than ever about these issues, and maybe not even to that extreme, but just pushing their opinions or perspectives onto a child before like a coach or a teacher. They just want to teach them soccer or math or science, and now it's like, here's some math. By the way, did I tell you that men could get pregnant? And it's like,
Yeah, what does that have to do with math? Just teach my kid math. Yeah.
so,
Mhm.
so we have the vaccine marathon coming up this weekend also, September 10th, I think.
10th.
10th and
Yeah, Saturday and Sunday, September 10th through 11th. We the Patriots, USA.org. You can go there to get the link to check it out. But it's on, all the various social media channels that we'll be streaming it on, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, things like that. And it is 24 hours of vaccine safety awareness, and they've been doing this is the third year, like you said. So this started before COVID, actually. So they've been trying to bring awareness to the stats and the safety concerns behind vaccines in general, not just this COVID shot. So there's a lot now, a lot more to talk about now too. So it's really cool. Brian Festa, the co-founder, is going to be basically in the hosting chair most of the time. I'm going to help him out. We've got a couple other people helping out hosting, but I got to hand it to him. He like pretty much goes 24 hours, interviewing. We've got some top doctors like Peter McCullough. You're going to be on there as well, a part of the vaccine safety awareness marathon. So it's just really neat. And I think that the climate that we're in, people are hungry for this information now. I said on my podcast this week, Candace Owens just had a multi-part special on vaccines, the childhood vaccine schedule. People are hungry for this information. Parents want to arm themselves to be able to make educated decisions on these things. So, you can go to wethepatriotsusa.org to see the full lineup, and there's some big heavy hitters in it. And I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, this is my third year. I'm proud to say that I've been on every
Yeah.
one, and I'll be on the 10th at noon. And before me, Doctor, actually everybody before me has been on the show. Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Lyons Wheeler, aka Dr. Jack, and then Dr. Pierre Corey. So many amazing people. Paulie Tommy is on the 10th, and tons of doctors this year too. And so definitely check it out. Support people like We the Patriots USA. I've sent so many people to the organization, people who are having issues with their employer, people who are having issues during the COVID. And like you said, they've been doing this way before. I knew Brian when he was doing CT Freedom Alliance. That's how I met him. And and Don, and I had him on, and it was a topic. I remember when I had them on the first time, to promote CT Freedom Alliance. it was a topic that was still a little fringe. I remember having Del Bigtree on the show, Dr. Brian Hooker. It was always a topic that I was very passionate about because I felt like if I was talking about politics, if I was talking about foreign policy, everybody's like, yeah, yeah, military industrial complex, super scary, tons of influence. But then you talk about medical freedom and you talk about vaccines and big pharma. It's like it was kind of dismissed a little bit. It didn't seem like a urgent issue, and now people are much more open-minded to the idea that maybe we should be questioning all vaccines, and maybe the same motives that uh, that led them to lie about these vaccines. Maybe those motives were there before COVID, and maybe the profit motive was also skewing the science that led us to believe that we should be jabbing our kid with Hep shots the second they're born, even though it's a sexually transmitted disease. And I don't know. I don't even know how anybody could logically argue that that is something that your child should get immediately. And again, I don't even want to get it because if the vaccine thing gets me so worked up because it's like it makes so little
It
sense.
does.
It makes so much sense to think like, hey, how about you just strengthen your kid's immune system? I mean, if I go to a hospital after somebody has a newborn, I have to wash my hands. So you're saying that their immune system could be, sensitive to germs but it's completely okay to shoot them up with vaccines immediately. Like, how does that make any sense without doing any tests or knowing if they're sensitive to it? Without, it's I use this metaphor all the time, and some people love it, some people hate it because I'm always using it. But I'm like, if I give every kid peanut butter, some kids are gonna die, right? Like, it doesn't. So this idea that vaccines are safe and effective is absolutely insanity. Like, just saying that out loud makes no sense. I'm like, it doesn't make any scientific sense. Nothing is safe and effective for everyone. As harmless as peanut butter is, it's dangerous and lethal to some people. So when people say, "Oh no, vaccines don't cause autism or vaccines don't lead to this," I'm like, you're right. In some people, and in others, it can, and that's a risk that you should know exists. And that's my problem with it. I'm getting worked up. This is
Not
I'm
to mention the rise in, chronic disease and, behavioral issues and things like that. There's correlation in the stats and the evidence. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious, but I don't blame any parents that trusted and that didn't know that they needed to question it. They thought that these doctors and these people, and I think that too, doctors for the most part do have, the best interests in mind. It's just that is how deep the bureaucracy, the lobbying, the sinister nature of the business and making money off of the select few that make money off of all of this. That's how deep this goes. And the fact that big pharma, who we now know is, shelling out the most money in lobbying, the fact that they have gotten the government on board for years, not just during COVID, but for years have gotten the government on board that you have to, have certain paperwork or certain things to send your kids to school or to function in public in a certain way. Like, guys, this is really deep stuff. And I think that, we're all starting to wake up to that. And we're all starting to wonder if it goes this deep with this, where else does it go this deep with other things?
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to get rid of the religious exemptions prior to COVID, and it was a huge issue. And it's like, well, where's the science that shows that like any of these kids who go to school unvaccinated are harming anybody, or they're
If you're vaccinated, you're supposed to be protected, right? It makes no sense.
yeah, none of it makes any sense. And that's the thing. This goes back to that brainwashing of our children at a young age, where it's like these are the authorities. They don't have opinions. They're just stating the facts. It's like, no, everybody has opinion, and our opinions, either knowingly or unknowingly, is affecting the way we look at the world. And so these scientists aren't these holy entities that don't have perspectives and opinions influencing what information they're giving you. They do. And I think people are finally waking up to that to some extent. And I mean, it was the same thing like with the Trump thing. I've talked about this before, where it's like everybody knew the media was lying and biased, and so sometimes the media would ask you questions like it got you questions because they wanted to get a headline because you said something dumb, or they want to get you off your game or whatever. Like, they knew these games were always going on with the press and the president, and with all presidents, not just Trump, all presidents. But Trump was the first one to be like, listen, I'm not playing this game. I'm just going to say, you're lying. You're this, you're that. He just basically said, I'm not going to play along. Everybody else is like, okay, we'll just pretend, that this is real. And he just basically said, no, I'm not going to play along with this game, and I'm just going to call you out. And when most politicians would be like, okay, I know this guy's going to ask me the question to try to get me to say this or whatever, but I'll play along. And I think people needed that. But the thing is too, when you look at like movies, pro wrestling, whatever it may be, even if they're actors and actresses, we still get emotionally involved. It still has an emotional effect on you. You still fall in love with a character. Oh, I love this character, or I hate that character, even though they're just characters. Politics is no different. Like, you can get so caught up in the storylines and fall in love with characters or whatever, but it's like you have to snap out of it and realize, like, it's just a facade, it's just an illusion. It's all, they have speech writers, they have psychologists and scientists that are telling them how to say things, how not to say things, how we perceive things if they say this way, how we how to make them come off more likable. Like, these are all well thought out things. There's nothing about it is organic. Like, a podcast is organic. That's why people like podcasts, because if I talk for an hour, eventually I'm going to sound like an idiot because I'm a human and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to, and who I really am is going to end up, you're going to see shades of that. You can only BS for so long, but when you're on TV and you're doing little segments and you're polished and you're taught to be polished, people can get caught up in that. So I think people are waking up, and I think shows like yours are doing a great job of helping people wake up. And there can never be enough podcasts, pushing these conversations and exposing what's really going on. So I hats off to you and what, We the Patriots USA are doing, and let people know where they can find you, what social media platforms you're on, any upcoming episodes or shows that you're excited about that you want to tell the people. Please promote.
Well, thanks. And thanks for all you do as well. You're a part of this club, basically, I should say, that are out there trying to help people and just present facts to people to be able to make their own decisions on matters. And so that's what we're doing. We're here on season 2, just one episode in so far. We release every Wednesday out on pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts, except for YouTube. We keep getting kicked off of YouTube. So we've expanded where we're putting our video podcasts out there. We're now not only on Rumble, but we're also on Rockfin and Odyssey and Brighteon. And we're also on the regular players for audio, like Apple and Spotify, what have you, wherever you listen. So you can catch us every Wednesday. We've got some big episodes coming up. I'm going to talk to Dr. Malone here next week. So he'll be coming on here soon. And I really am going to expand who I'm talking to and talk more about, food, nutrition, and how deep the bureaucracy and the money flows on those issues, and how you can, educate yourself and make different decisions for you and your family. And, I'm kind of taking people on the same journey that I'm on, and learning more about these things like EMFs and data protection. And, so it's not only just going to be about health freedom, but we're also just talking about, or medical freedom rather, but it's going to be about health freedom in general, and just arming yourselves and educating yourself in any way that you can. There's so many wonderful doctors and people out there that are doing great, truthful and work out there that want to help other people. So that's where you can catch us each Wednesday, Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson. You can also catch us on wethepatriotsusa.org. There's a Faithful Freedom page on there too.
Awesome. And are you on Twitter or any the other social?
I am most active on Instagram, Teryn Gregson. You can find me on Instagram. I do have, Facebook and Twitter, but I hardly ever post on it. I haven't posted much. I tell people I got really mad at Twitter when they censored the Hunter Biden stuff a couple of years ago. I was like, okay, I'm out on you, Twitter. Not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's the thing about those social media platforms. It's you could back in the day go on YouTube and like explore different perspectives and opinions, and you
Hmm.
Twitter and see different people and different journalists and different, and now it's like you're just force fed the same thing. It's made it uninteresting. And when people call like Rumble or Parler or Getter or whoever other alternative platform, oh, it's right wing, it's like, well, that's because those are the people who are being censored. It just, when you censor one, if you censored more bigger variety of people, then more of those people would be on those platforms. But you're censoring, it seems, and it's not even just right wing or left wing. It's anybody who is just going against the mainstream narrative, and that's the thing that people have to snap out of. It's like it's not left versus right, blue versus red. It's them versus us, and and that's what people have to kind of realize, that like your neighbor that you're arguing with, like he's on your team, and your family member that you're arguing with, like he's on your team too. We're all on the team. Like the elite they don't care about us, and they don't care what ideology we may have. They just worry about more money, more power, more profit, and constantly pushing their agendas. So I'll put links to all your stuff in the show description. Hopefully we talk again in the near future. And also, I don't know if you're aware of my other show that I host. Brian's been on there quite a few times, the Union of the Unwanted. I'll if you ever want to come on, it's like a big Zoom conference call of thinkers, researchers, and yeah, and authors, doctors.
Sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's